Good afternoon. I am Jessica Rosenworcel, and I am the Chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, and it is great to join you for the 2022 Global Aerospace Summit. Thank you so much to the U.S. Chamber for inviting me to be here for this discussion. Now, I can't imagine I'm the first person to mention this, but of course, 60 years ago this week, President Kennedy kicked off the first space age in earnest when he stepped inside a football stadium at Rice University and declared that the United States would put a man on the moon. It's easily one of the most iconic speeches in our nation's history. And you know this speech. It's the one where he said that we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I bet you also know what came next, because just a few years later, 3 astronauts from the United States journeyed from a small Florida peninsula to a dry crater about 240,000 miles away on the surface of the moon. You probably also remember what happens after that, because hundreds of millions of people watched on black and white televisions and heard Neil Armstrong say, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Now, those words, those images, they are justifiably famous. But now I want to tell you a part of the story you may not know. You see, just a few months before President Kennedy gave that moonshot speech, the United States launched the first communications satellite to ever go into orbit. It was called Telstar 1. Now, Telstar 1 was a precursor of so much to come, not just because it ushered in an era of new connectivity, but because, remember this, it was the world's first commercial space mission. Now, I'm proud to say that Telstar 1 launch was facilitated by the Federal Communications Commission, and it was done under the leadership of one of my predecessors, Newton Minow, who I need to add is still growing strong at 96 because it bodes well. Now, speaking about Telstar 1, Chairman Minow famously told President Kennedy that communication satellites will be much more important than sending man into space because they will send ideas into space. And ideas last longer than men. I believe it. Telstar 1 reminds us that the United States is the place where we look to the skies, we dream big, and then we make it happen. So that's why I'm here today. I'm here because the FCC had big dreams for America's first space age, and we have big dreams now for America's second space age. In fact, last month, I had the privilege of joining the Vice President of the United States at the Chabot Space and Science Center in Oakland, California, to talk about some of the things we are doing to help bring commercial space policy into the 21st century. And last week, that effort continued when I spent time at Johnson Space Center in Houston and joined the second meeting of the National Space Council. So I want to share with you what comes next. But I'm going to start by setting the stage. The FCC is responsible for the oversight of communications networks, and that includes the use of our commercial airwaves. So satellite systems have long been a part of our portfolio. But what is happening now is new. Every day we see new companies, new business models, and new technologies that are pioneering a new space economy. Every day we see how the expansion of new space-based activities can remake our world. And we see how there is work to do to support all this activity in our highest altitudes. So I think the United States needs to lead in this new space age and emerging space economy. And it's one of the reasons why I announced a new space innovation initiative at the FCC to help us do just that. And so far, our initiative has 3 lines of effort. First, we know we need new rules for the new space age. Here on the ground, the regulatory frameworks we rely on to shape space policy, they were largely built for another era. They were designed for a time when going to space was astronomically expensive and limited to the prowess of our political superpowers. No one imagined commercial space tourism taking hold. No one believed crowd-funded satellites and mega constellations at low Earth orbit were even possible. And no one could have ever conceived of the popularity of space entrepreneurship. but it's all happening. So across the board, we are working to update our rules, bulk up our ranks at the FCC to support this policy, and speed up the commercial licensing process. In fact, I'm proud to say that we have increased the size of our agency responsible for satellite matters by 38%. And that means we've added more engineers, more policy experts to our roster to help us keep pace with all this new commercial activity. Second, we are promoting space innovation, and this is important because it's not enough to refine the policies of the past. In the United States, we need to build what is new. That's why in July, I kicked off an effort to support new in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, or we have an acronym, of course. It's what we call Isam Capabilities. Now, Isam Capabilities can help us repair and refuel satellites in space, assemble whole systems while they are in orbit, and even build entire new industries that are going to advance scientific frontiers and national security. Our inquiry is going to help set the foundation to lead in the development of these capabilities. Now, on top of that, we are making more spectrum available to fuel our space ambitions. In July, we decided to free up more airwaves in the 17 gigahertz band to support the growing demand for space-based services. Before that, we identified spectrum that for the first time ever in the United States, we will dedicate to supporting commercial space launches. And those are airwaves in the 2200 to 2290 megahertz band. We also cleared the way for more satellite operators to make use of airwaves in the 50 gigahertz band, proposed updates to our processing round rules for satellite systems to encourage more spectrum sharing and competition, and opened up new opportunities in the V-band nationwide. That's a lot. Third, we are supporting space sustainability. Now, growing the space economy requires action to care for our skies so that the space economy can actually support our grandest ambitions. But right now, there are thousands of metric tons of orbital debris in the skies above. We need to address it. Because if we don't, this space junk, this garbage, could constrain new opportunities. Now, to explain why, I want to take a look back at another satellite very early in our first space age. And I'm talking about Vanguard 1. Of course, for billions of years, space was not a landscape for human endeavors. Then the space race began, and in 1958, NASA launched Vanguard 1 into our skies. And here's the thing. It still circles the planet today. Now, at the time when Vanguard 1 was launched, it was a bold undertaking. It was a commitment to the communications possibilities of the future. But today, it also represents something else, a reminder of the work we have to do to address orbital debris. Since 1957, humanity's put about 10,000 satellites into the sky. More than half of those are now defunct. You see, many of them were launched with the understanding that it was just cheaper to abandon them than to take them out of orbit. That means, like Vanguard 1, they stay in orbit for decades, careening around our increasingly crowded skies as space junk. That's bad, because it raises the risk of collisions that harm satellites that we count on, and it makes it harder to launch new objects into higher orbits, and even has environmental consequences back on Earth. Okay, so fast forward to last week at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. At the meeting of the National Space Council, I announced a new FCC effort to help clean up space and address orbital debris. For years, it has been the recommended practice for satellite operators to deorbit their spacecraft within 25 years of completing their missions. 25 years is an awfully long time. There's no reason to wait that long, especially in a low Earth orbit. Our space economy is moving fast, and for it to continue to grow, we need to do more to clean up after ourselves so space innovation can continue to expand. So I announced a proposal that I shared with my FCC colleagues that would shorten this period from 25 years to 5 years. That's big. If adopted, it will mean more accountability and less risk of collisions that increase debris and the likelihood of space communications failures. So I hope my colleagues will vote for this and join me in this effort. All right, so there you have it. New rules, new innovation, and sustainability. Again, 60 years ago, President Kennedy announced we'd go to the moon, and it wasn't going to be easy. But the awe of that effort stays with us even today. And that's why we're setting the foundation, or maybe I should say, setting up the launch pad to go even further and expand the opportunities in space. And I look forward to working with all of you to make it happen. Thank you.